never considered that thinking about your problems all the time and talking about your problems all the time literally make the problems grow.
Now, are therapists incentivized to keep you depressed? Being that it's Mental Health Awareness Month, I saw this clip from Joe Rogan and he was talking about depression. And a lot of times when we talk about mental health, the first thing people think about is depression. It's probably the most dealt with diagnosis or just the feeling. And we all have moments of being sad. But what I took from this clip was pretty interesting that how did the person go about analyzing what depression actually is, and Joe's mind was blown. So let's go over this and get more detailed of the different mechanisms that go along with dealing with mental health issues, in this case, mostly depression.
It's the number one symptom of depression is what they call rumination, this pathological obsessing over your pain.
Yeah.
That's why stuff like exercise, that's one of the reasons, aside from chemical reasons, one of the reasons that doing anything, that running errands is good for your mental health, getting out of your house and accomplishing anything is good.
I'll stop right there. I talked about a video a few months back with Joe Rogan about mental health, and he said exercise is mental health. And there's a lot of science on that. For example, there's something called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which we now know is associated with secreting more of this chemical to help with the stimulation of neuron growth. Now, this is going to come back full circle, because when we talk about things like getting out the house and doing something like she said, running errands, this is big because from an evolutionary standpoint, depression existed for our whole existence on Earth. It's just that nowadays we get stuck in this rumination, as you said, thinking about the thoughts over and over. But back in ancient times, even up until a few hundred years ago, we couldn't do that because survival was key. And you could spend all day soaking. Yeah, you could go away to yourself for a day or two, but you had to figure it out and problem solve what's going on with me, get over it and move on and get back to it. So that's why getting out and active, whether it be fitness or socializing or just running errands, is good when you're depressed, because now you're challenging, one, these ruminating thoughts that are going to be just in a cycle of what is going to defeat you. And two, you're telling your brain and body to do something else. And then three, the BDNF thing I talked about with the chemical that actually helps build up neurons. Like I said, I'm going to come back to why that's important, but let's keep checking this out.
For you, but sitting around talking and thinking about your problems, that's a bad habit. And the best cognitive behavioral therapists and others, the dialectical behavioral therapists, the ones who do really well with depression, the first thing they do is try to break that bad pattern.
So looking at that, right, the video is pretty much over, but it's talking about breaking patterns and going back to that rumination, going back to that BDNF, building new neuron pathways. Let's bring this all full circle. Now, BDNF is not just bringing neurons to every part of the brain, not to get too deep into neuroscience, but there's all types of neurons throughout your brain, and brain cells, I should say. But the neurons we're talking about are specifically in the hippocampus, which is the long-term memory storage and learning region of the brain. Think why this matters. Because if rumination is always repetitive, right? When we talk about fight or flight or PTSD, it's usually because that long-term memory storage is getting triggered when we get stressed. And that's where the trauma comes in and it replays it in that cycle, what happened, and associates these thoughts with the behavior of, oh my gosh, last time this happened, I faltered, or I was anxious, or I felt bad. Now bring it back to this, how do we build those new pathways? The exercise or movement or just doing something that's cognitive stimulating. Now bring it back to not ruminating. If we're building these new neuronal pathways in the hippocampus, the region of the brain that is associated with learning and memory, what does that tell us? We need to learn new patterns, as she mentioned. And those are the type of therapists or the practitioners do the best. They teach you how to build new solutions, new patterns. Like I said, in ancient times, we had to be problem solvers, but because you couldn't just sulk all the time. It was okay to go away from the tribe and be to yourself to figure it out. But it was inevitable that you had to get over it. Now we have Netflix, we have Uber Eats, we have Amazon Prime. We pretty much can do everything we need and get everything we need from a survival standpoint for the most part without having to even leave our house. You can see how this could be a problem with depression. Now with that rumination, if we build these new pathways, learn new skills, involving new activities that makes us have to be stimulated to do something else, our brain is now primed to take on this to be better. That's why Mind Body One, what we do, is so important, because you're physiologically changing the brain from our drills and activities, but we also teach the mental skills to be better. So it's not just this one approach from let's talk about thoughts, or this other approach of let's just do cognitive training or something physical. We bring it all together. So it's not just this cliche thing. So she did a great job of explaining this. And we got to look at mental health as a more dynamic process. It's not static. I always use the analogy of working out because if I went to the gym, did some dynamic stretches, high knees, jumping jacks, jump rope, and did some static stretches like stretch my arm across, reach down, and then just left, great. I'm flexible, I'm loose and warmed up. But I put nothing on my body to adapt. That's what's lacking in the mental health industry. We're not doing the side that makes you have to adapt. We're not adapting. You have to put more on you. So in this case, you have to do new things. Like she said, stimulate your mind. And in our case, we'll give you structured ways to do that. So think about this all. This was a great video, and I love the fact that it brought a new perspective on mental health and performance, and one that's usually not talked about. People talk about being in therapy for years and years and years, just like a personal trainer. You don't want to always be training with a trainer. They give you a guide, they get you in better shape, and eventually you wean off slowly but surely. So hope you guys like this video. Let me know in the comments what you think. What's the best way you can get better mental health in your opinion? So thanks for tuning in. As always, get your mind right.